Hey folks, it is April the 27th, and today we are going to continue on with our lecture on World War One and for world history. My bad. And please keep in mind that your projects are due on Thursday, and so that means we're not going to have a lecture on Thursday or Friday. So make sure you turn in all that stuff so we can get it in for you. This is going to be a major grade, so do it. If you have a problem, contact now. Don't wait till it's late. Don't wait till it's due. All right, kids. So last time we were talking about the things that led to World War One. There are big picture items such as nationalism, such as tensions, such as all of these ententes, these agreements for defensive pacts, where if you go to war, we will go to war too, no matter what. You have arms buildup. They have all of these weapons and trained soldiers who are at the ready and nothing to do with them. And then we have an assassination. The assassination leads to one nation demanding for another nation to lose its sovereignty. Other nations step in at their defense. Next thing you know, the war kicks off. So what's going on?
More bloodshed.
Yeah. So here's a picture of the front. And so you see here we have some guys loading up artillery shells. And you can see the artillery here is very different from something you might have seen in the U.S. Civil War. At the end of the U.S. Civil War, they started putting their artillery on suspension that can absorb recoil and help out with accuracy and things like that. They're starting to develop sight systems. There's a science to the math and measurements of where your shells will hit, how to angle the barrel, and things like that. Different kinds of shells that might explode above the ground. Why do you think they would want to have artillery shells explode above the ground instead of on the ground? Yeah, it will rain it. Because if it blows up on the ground, it'll create a crater in the ground, and that crater will blow all the shrapnel upwards. So if you're lying down, you're probably safe. But if you're lying down and it blows up overhead, it's just like death confetti all over you. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's rough stuff. And there's even tactics to it. Like they'll still use this today to where they'll rain down the ones that if you lay down, you're okay. And so while you're laying down, then they'll bring the ones in that blow up overhead. So while you're laying down, you're a bigger target. It's cruel, but I mean, people are very thoughtful.
Why we have foxholes.
Well, yeah, but you don't always have foxholes when you're on patrol or something like that. You're just going to have to do the best you can. All right, so trench warfare. Due to the effectiveness of the newly invented machine gun, troops dug in and fought from the trenches. This is something, like I told you, that the world learned from the U.S. Civil War. They saw places like the Battle of Fredericksburg. They saw how the trenches could keep soldiers from getting shot. But it's going to make other problems. This led to a stalemate on the Western Front in France. And there's going to be very little movement east to west. Men are going to charge towards these trenches only to be machine gunned down or blowed up. So it's going to be horrible. They won't even be able to go in to collect the dead, except for very short times of armistice where they're allowed to go out, like say before the evening and stuff. Little gains were made. Both sides suffered massive casualties. Advances in technology contributed to this. You have airplanes. We talked about little biplanes. They didn't have a lot in the way of armaments, but they helped change the game. Poison gas. And so now all of a sudden you have to have troops that are at the ready with gas masks, things like that. But usually you didn't know that you needed a gas mask until you saw someone next to you suffering from poison gas, and it was usually too late. You got it on and you already ingested a bunch of this stuff. Tanks. Tanks were good because they were essentially armored well enough to resist the machine gun. And they're wide and long enough with their treads to make it over trenches. And so this was supposed to be a counter to the trench and the machine gun. Machine guns, of course, decimate open infantry. A man who's wearing nothing more than a cloth jacket is no match for, something that's just going to stitch you to pieces. And, of course, modern artillery. which is, even to this day, if you include air power, that is the most casualty producing weapon in warfare. It's cannons, mortars, and aircraft. And that's all a form of artillery. High casualty rates. 8.5 million soldiers killed. This is astronomical compared to any war ever throughout all of human history. So this was just terrible. It's devastating. You had entire sections of Europe depopulated of fighting age men. Whole villages that were nothing but women, children, and the elderly, because all the men went off and died. 21 million soldiers will be wounded. And these guys who come back wounded, most of them are so wounded, they're not able to enter the workforce. They come back home. They have mental problems from all of the horrors that they saw of battle and from concussions and brain damage. They might be missing legs. Amputations were all over the place because they didn't have good medicine to heal shattered bones. So these people, this war was so bad that a lot of these nations, it would take a long time to recover just because of the human cost. Countless civilian deaths due to starvation, illness, and the slaughter. And in most wars, that's the ones who suffer the most. It's the civilians. It's the people who have nothing to do with the fight. These wars happened essentially in the areas where people were growing their food. And so it will cause massive shortages, illness, water pollution from all of these people, just all kinds of massive problems. The First World War, it's going to be very traumatizing for Western society. All of that heroism and stuff like that, and all the talk of nobility from the age of imperialism, from the Renaissance, and from the Enlightenment, people are going to be like, so what? We're just killing each other. It's going to make people very cynical. Very cynical.
And it's weird for people that like that, have fun with that.
Well, yeah, and most of them, they were shaken up from that. Like it's gone by the first week. They're like, oh gosh, it's real. I didn't know it was like this. And but yeah, I'm sure there were some crazy folks out there too. The generals never went up to the front. They didn't care. They were just trying to boost their numbers up and make it look like they were doing something. So they would just send waves of young men out there to get torn apart.
Where they would put one gun, bullets, and they would drug them. So even though they had first guys hanging out, they still
I didn't know about that. What's sad here too is much like World War II, the East. This is a two-front war. So Germany is surrounded. They're fighting the French and the British on one side, and the Russians on the other. But just like World War II, what we call the Russian side, the Eastern Front, is going to be the worst. That's where the worst fighting is going to be, and it's going to be so bad that it's going to help push Russia into a revolution. We'll see that in a minute. So here's a rather narrow trench. Here you have young man leading the charge. Usually it's an officer. He might be armed with nothing more than a whistle to give his troops the command to go out. And being a lieutenant in these kind of battles was always very low life expectancy. So British officer leads charge over the top. Yeah, not the best job in the world. Poison gas caused blindness, severe blisters, and death by choking. And so here we see the combination of industry and science coming together in warfare. Machine guns improved during World War I. We know that machine guns were around before that. Such in the U.S., they had the Gatling gun. But here they're going to have machine guns that are developed to be water-cooled and belt-fed. And it's water-cooled because, guns work through explosions, and those explosions get hot, and it can warp, melt a barrel. But if it's water-cooled, it's able to shoot longer. If it's belt-fed, it's essentially being fed kind of like a sewing machine. So it can constantly be churning through bullets, right? So instead of where just a team of 2 or 3 men can do the shooting power of like a couple of dozen. Improved during World War One, large numbers of casualties created and caused stalemates due to its ability to stop troop advancements. And so they could put these at places where they had wide sectors of fire in open terrain, where they had choice targets, and they could lay down things like I'm thinking about here, different kinds of fire over areas and stuff like that. It was very, very devastating. Tanks are vehicles that move across wide areas that did not promote a fast-moving war as planned. So at first, both sides developed the tank relatively about the same time. Kind of like how both sides of the Civil War developed the ironclads about the same time. But they weren't quite the game changer they were hoping for, though they were able to help get past some trenches. Anti-tank weapons were there pretty quickly. In fact, things like we call recoilless rifles, very, very powerful crew-served cannons that can pierce these things and destroy them very quickly. Airplanes provided photo reconnaissance with newly developed cameras. Some early bombings, but the bombings are mostly very primitive, where you're like holding a bomb and dropping it, or they would have a box of grenades in their lap and they just kind of toss the grenades out, because they've been using grenadiers and grenades ever since they've had early matchlock muskets. And warfare in the air, especially when they figured out how to set up machine guns to where it could fire forward, and they could time it to where the bullet would only fire in between the rotor blade, so they wouldn't shoot their own rotor blades off. They were able to have dogfights and stuff after that. Yeah, that would have been bad to shoot your own airplane apart. So that's no bueno.
They're both for the first people that figured out that would happen.
Yeah, they didn't have. I don't think they had fun. Well, did they have functioning parachutes yet? A parachute was invented way before World War One, but I don't know if it was successfully used for jumping out of airplanes at this time. No, paratroopers will be World War II, but I'm trying to figure out if they had it for like pilot safety. I don't think they did. I think your best shot was try to guide that thing in and hope you don't break too many bones. Right. All right, let's move on to 3 or 4. Hey, speaking of dogfights, and here you see a model where we actually have a 2-seater. We got a guy back here doing some swivel fire with a machine gun. So I tell you, shooting from a gun turret is fun.
Who would have thought it's great until you're one that's...
Yeah, I know when we shot, right? And yeah, I mean, especially when you think about like landmines and IEDs, that's not fun either. I mean, you're kind of the first person they're going to aim for, but I mean, it's nice when it's like not real. All right, let's move on. So World War I technology continued. Submarines, you had the development of U-boats. Now we know from American history America history had its first underwater boat in the American Revolution. Now, unfortunately, the people who piloted it died, but it was in operation. Um, and so it's called U-boat for underwater. And the Germans got very good at this. But they weren't very good at picking out what their targets were. They couldn't see that well. So sometimes they shot down boats that were just full of civilians. Oops. So that's going to be one of the things that gets the United States involved in this war, is because they're going to kill some of our civilians a couple of times. Yeah. Well, and cruise liners too. So submarine U-boat, unrestricted warfare on naval ships, and often targeted non-combatant vessels. So this is a type of thing, like the United States, what we tried to do over and over again. We did this before the War of 1812, and we did that here before World War I, where we're trying to trade with our allies, right? Even though the war is going on, we're trying to stay out of the war. But by doing so, you play a risk, because the losing side will see you as trading with the enemy, even if you're out of the war. And so sometimes our civilians would get shot or kidnapped, stuff like that, like before the War of 1812. Well, here it happens again. We're going to have U.S. boats blown up, or boats where we're on British liners filled with American citizens. But yeah, these are going to be very scary. So this is before people could travel by plane. And so if you wanted to go see family in another part of the world, you'd have to take a boat, but at the risk of having a U-boat blow you up. So, scary time. Flamethrowers used to flush out enemy troops from trenches. And so the flamethrower is it's very cruel but effective. If you have an entire line of people who are hiding behind cover, well, if you just torch that thing in there, it'll clear them out. So this was and you're going to see this used a lot in the Pacific theater in World War II against the Japanese, where you're going to have a lot of that too. So they were used in D-Day. They were like, so this was used especially back when there was a lot of bunker fighting and stuff. These new technologies led to a massive backlash into what should be restricted in warfare, especially the use of deadly gas. And so this is going to bring up the question is like, should we use anything in warfare that can harm people? Deadly gas, germ warfare, fire, submarines that can't quite tell what target they're shooting at? This brings up a lot of moral questions. Like, we're able to do a lot of things. Should we do all of it? This demonstrated how industry could be used to harm mankind and made many question the good of modern technology. Like, well, what's good? What good is technology if all you do is just hurt people with it? You know. Well, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people are always scared of them because they were really scared that if the tank got shot, what would happen to you? You know. Now, if I remember right, though, a U.S. Army study of World War II showed that tank explosions were super rare, right? Like they would leak and maybe have fire come out, but usually you could get them off, get away from the thing, you know. But I don't think they didn't detonate. You know, it wasn't an explosive material, but it was very flammable. Yeah.
And then you have people that would throw the grenades inside of the tank. And then it would explode inside the tank. It would deliver like driving tanks with things useless.
Well, I mean, things like booby trapping things was very common. It's so common today. All right. Let me think here. These are. We see the. I don't know whose troops these are. I think these are American doughboys. Last one of the day. So, World War I, the United States. The United States was only involved in the war for a short time, 1917 to 1918. Now, we did do a lot of trading with the Allies, and we offered trade to the Germans, but we really favored the British in this on purpose. The United States initially remained neutral, although by doing nothing to prevent the Allies from procuring American supplies, so what we would do is we traded a lot with the Allies, the French and the British. And since the British had the best navy, they were able to prevent the Germans from trading with us. So even though we didn't say outright we favored England and France, we kind of just went along with it because we actually did. This effectively prevented the Germans from doing the same. The U.S. became an important supplier of war materials and money to the Allies. So this is going to get Germany very mad. And guess what? Spoiler alert, they're going to start using those U-boats on American boats on purpose. Because they're going to be like, you are trading with our enemy, therefore you are our enemy. So, like I said, you know, think about American history. This kind of thing happens in the War of before the War of 1812 as well. France and Britain are going to be super mad at us for trading with both sides, and we're just going to get dragged into the war. So,
And then we're going to have citizens kidnapped.
yeah. They're going to be impressed, like to the British Navy. We'll try to invade Canada. It didn't work out that well. They had more syrup than we could handle, I guess. Hey, folks, that's going to end it for today. We will pick back up with a little bit more on the U.S. involvement in World War I when we come back tomorrow. And then we'll move on to things like the Great Depression, stuff like that, and all that good stuff. So, all right, see you later, because it's a worldwide depression. It's not just American. It's a worldwide economic depression.